Welcome to this edition of Pottstown Borough Buzz on the PCTV network. This edition we are shooting at the Pottstown Wastewater Treatment Plant, and we're here with Director of Utilities Brent Wagner. I'm your host, Cheryl Miller, and you are watching the PCTV network. So here we are on this beautiful fall day at the wastewater treatment plant, and we're at the Influent Building where operations at the wastewater treatment plant begin. We're out here with Director of Utilities, Brent Wagner, and he's going to give us a tour and explain to us how it all works.
Okay. We're at the Pottstown Wastewater Treatment Plant. The building located behind us is the Influent Building. This is where the beginning of our process begins. We accept wastewater from Lower Pottsgrove, Upper Pottsgrove, Lower Pottsgrove, and obviously the Borough of Pottstown. In this building, we are removing screening materials of rocks, stones, anything that anyone can flush down the toilet. We try to remove that before the process.
So this is the very beginning. This is somebody flushes their toilet and this is where it comes.
That is correct. And basically we're trying to remove, since we're a biological operation facility, we want to remove anything that's incompatible, again, like rocks are our main problem because they can deteriorate our equipment.
This is where the strongest odors begin because this is unprocessed and just entering?
Yes, as you mentioned, we do have some odor issues at the wastewater treatment plant. On and off, we'll have residents give us a buzz in regards to odors. We will get, obviously, hydrogen sulfide, the rotten egg smell at this facility, and we use chlorine to help mitigate that odors.
Is there a limit or an amount that's regulated for chlorine that you can enter into the water system, into the sewer water system?
To go into chemistry, we're averaging about 1 to 2 milligrams per liter of hydrogen sulfide, and we're adding about 200 some pounds a day of chlorine to mitigate those odors.
And so you get complaints from area residents and then you address those complaints as they come in. And so as we're out here today, we have an employee of the wastewater treatment plant, John Horvat, who is a South Street resident, so he is on the cusp of everything that comes through and what he smells at his own residence. John, would you like to join us? John, how long have you been employed here at the wastewater treatment plant?
26 going on 27 years.
That's fantastic. And you are a South Street resident, so
Yes.
Much of the odors you probably smell locally at your residence.
Yes, yes.
And then when you do experience odors, what do you do?
Well, if I'm at home, I could either call the plant or give Brent a call, tell them what I'm smelling up at my house, and they can start doing whatever they need to do to litigate the problem. So you can like start by shutting the doors or putting more fragrance on that we use for odor control back behind the dryer building.
Are you able to contact the plant 24 hours a day with a complaint?
More or less, yeah, if I have to, yeah.
And then how would somebody go about doing that? Is there a number that they would call?
Yeah, there is a borough number they can call us, 610-970-6540. That's our main number we call here, and you should be able to get an operator right away.
And do you find that everything gets taken care of in a timely manner?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, you know, depending how bad the odor is, a lot of our odors are pretty much in the summertime when we haven't had any rain for like weeks on end, and everything just sits and goes ripe after a while.
And how long have you been a South Street resident?
I moved there back in 2000.
Okay, so you're there for 16 years and
Yes.
here for 26 years.
Yep.
So you must be a very happy borough resident and borough employee.
Well, for the most part.
John, thank you very much. Thank you very much for talking with us today. We greatly appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Brett, where are we standing now?
We are standing at our second part of our process at the pre-aeration tanks, where we're actually taking atmospheric air and pumping it into the wastewater to actually acclimate the organisms for oxygen.
So what kind of organisms are they and what do they do?
We're mainly a bacteriological system, extended aeration wastewater treatment plant. But again, moving back to here, we're actually another process in this tank. We're actually removing, as I mentioned at the Influent Building, rocks and stones and grit. At the bottom of this tank grit is settling out to the bottom, your eggshells and everything else. because if those eggshells get in our pumps, they grind them down. So every year we remove approximately 80 tons of grit a year.
And then what becomes of the grit?
The grit will just lime stabilize it and it gets landfilled.
And adding the air and increasing the organisms, is that what's happening when you're adding air? It's
We're
giving
actually
them
not
life?
doing any treatment here yet. All you're doing is right now, as I mentioned, we have odors. There's no oxygen available in the wastewater at this point. So we're actually pumping oxygen into the wastewater so that the organisms can metabolize in the waste.
Brent, this tank looks very different from where we came from. So can you tell me what we're seeing now?
As you mentioned, we were at the pre-aeration tanks a moment ago. Now we're at actually our wet well. It's a return activated sludge. These are actually, as you can see, it's brown. These are your bacterial organisms that will actually use the influent as the hamburger. The influent wastewater has food for these organisms to metabolize and grow.
And how does the water, is this water from going from here to somewhere else, or is water coming from there to here?
From here, the return activated sludge, which is the brown wastewater here, will actually mix with the influent at another part of the facility as we go forward, and they become a mixed liquor. So they're actually going to come together as a combined.
And these organisms are eating some of the bacteria,
Any waste material that's coming from restaurants, industrial sites, and from homeowners. Anything you flush down the toilet, your urine, and your other fecal waste, these organisms will use that as food.
and there's nothing added into here, no chemicals or no chlorine, no chemicals, no additives.
The only thing that we do, again, we're a biological facility. The only thing we do add in this process, we do add low doses of chlorine to keep certain organisms under control. And we don't have them go, I call it nuts, that they affect our effluent quality. So we're actually introducing a low level of chlorine.
Explain what that means, a biological facility.
Basically, it's no different than what the river's doing. We're taking the same organisms that are out in the river that would treat our waste, but we're doing it in a faster way by using organisms that you found in the environment, add more air for metabolizing for their process.
Brent, what are we looking at now?
Over there is our positive displacement blowers. Again, we're taking air and we're pumping that air into our digesters. That's actually one of our last processes. As I mentioned about the mixed liquor, when we're combining the influent and our return activated sludge, since we're producing more sludge because of all the waste material, we have to extract that sludge out of the system. What we're doing here is we're pumping air into our digester waste where our return activated sludge has thickened, and we're adding more oxygen and actually turning the organisms, and to keep it simple, is we're turning them to cannibals to make them eat each other up to reduce the amount of quantity of sludge leaving the facility. Also, this is one of our highest energy demands part of the plant. On average, we're averaging $15,000 to $20,000 a month of electrical demand with these type of blowers.
Because these blowers have to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
That's correct. This facility never shuts down. We're 365 days a year, 24 hours a day.
If you have any mechanical difficulties with the blowers, what happens? Do you have a backup blower?
Everything in our facility, we have to have a backup. As you mentioned, we cannot ever shut down. So if a piece of equipment does fail, which time to time we do have mechanical failures, we have a backup to to the blower. If you see, we have 3 of them. We're running 1 of them right now. 1 is out of service right now because we had a mechanical difficulty with it, and we have 1 backup at this point.
Do the wastewater treatment plant employees handle the mechanical problems? Do they do the repairs themselves?
We do a combined. If it's too large of it, if it takes machining, we'll send it out. But most of the equipment internally, 85% of our maintenance is done by internal staff.
So everything in the plant is odor related because everything is working together. The organisms, the aeration, the additive of the chemicals is all working together to reduce the odors being emitted from the wastewater treatment plant.
That's correct. With this process, the influent, you're going to smell hydrogen sulfide. With this process, with the digester, you're going to smell an earthy odor. Going back, as you're going to the shore and under low tides, you'll smell, I always call it that back bay odor, that sour smell. you will actually get the same type of odors from this as you get in the back bay of the beach.
We're out here at the heart of the plant, Brent, and tell me what that means.
Basically, as we mentioned, we had the pre-aeration tanks at the other side and the return activated sludge. Right here we have a mixing chamber where those two wastewaters, influent raw sewage and the return activated sludge meet, mix them together, and as you go down, these are extended aeration tanks. Basically now the treatment has begun. If you look, there's a lot of air being pumped into the tanks, and basically we're providing oxygen for the organism to break down the waste.
So every time that we looked at so far, Brent, that there's organisms in every tank that we looked at that are biological, that are treating the water. There was no area that they do not exist in, correct?
That's correct. But basically, if you look here, I'm going to give you a quick wastewater treatment course. As you look down these aeration tanks, you see a slight frothing of bubbles. So basically what I look there, as long as they're light bubbles, not dark, they're running very well. And again, the process, actually the end of this tank, our process is complete other than settling out the organisms to the end of the in a clarifier. As I meant, if you saw in the one tank before, it was very dark brown sludge. Mm-hmm. In this tank, you see a lighter brown. So as we move to that other part of the plant, you'll see a clarifier as we proceed to that part, and that material will settle to the bottom, and the clean water will go off into the river.
So while we're out here, I see this beautiful, round, historic-looking building. Could you tell me what that is?
That's actually called our lower pump house. That is actually pumping a majority of the borough of Pottstown and Upper Pottsgrove raw wastewater to our facility. So it's basically taking the west part of town.
Is this the only pumping station on the plant?
Yes, we have one on the plant. We have at Memorial Park, we have a force main that comes from the complete western part of town, plus West Pottsgrove that goes in that station. And then at Circle of Progress, we have a small pump station.
And then are there other pump stations from other townships that still come to the Pottstown Borough wastewater
Yes,
treatment
Lower
plant?
Pottsgrove has a large pump station that pumps right into our headworks.
This is a revenue generating plant, and most of it is self-sufficient. So what is it that happens here?
This is our bulk sewage and sludge disposal site. As you mentioned, we do bring in a lot of outside waste. We average about $2.4 million a year in outside revenue being generated, so we can lower our rates for our residents. A hauler will actually come up here, and ironically we don't have one discharging at this point. Will come up here and discharge their waste, and they will take a sample and we'll analyze it and determine an associated fee for them to discharge at our facility.
Because different types of waste have to go different places, and they have different fees assigned to them.
That's correct. I mean, every different wastewater that comes in here, sludge, septage, holding tank, all have a different cost analysis because it deals with certain things cost more to treat. Like a septage coming from someone's residence is going to be less costly than a sludge coming from another municipality.
Now, although I'm not smelling a great deal of odors from this location at this time, this would be one of the places that you probably would experience a greater amount of odor, just as when everything is coming in from the sewer.
Yes, that is correct. We do have a lot of odors that come from this facility because as they're discharging, those gases that get emitted into the atmosphere right away. There is we do add different chemicals to mitigate those odors. We're adding chlorine. We actually add a fragrance as well to mitigate those odors. But we also, and to also control odors, we're covering this tank as well.
Have you done anything, although it does affect revenue, have you done anything in like the reduction of the types of sewage or trucks that are coming in?
Again, we depend on home residents to tell us if they smell something, because sometimes we don't have it localized. But if we can get the time that someone gives us an odor complaint, we have a system in there that can determine exactly what is being discharged, and we can actually decrease the type of material coming in, or add chemicals, or have the municipality add certain things to their waste to reduce our odors.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense to know what time and what it is so that you can determine actually what you can do to reduce that particular waste. Because if you're smelling something here or you're not smelling something here, the wind, the heat is picking it up and taking it other places.
That's correct.
So it's very important for residents to call in when they're experiencing something.
Yes, the more they can tell us the time and duration of when they're smelling the odor, we can actually find out what the source is causing it. A lot of times if you look here, the air could go up, it's warm, and it cools down and comes out and drops in the town.
We're nearing the end of our process here, Brent, so tell us where we are now.
We're actually after the aeration tanks where we're actually doing our treatment. As I mentioned, we have the return activated sludge. At this tank, we're basically making a big pool of settling out our bugs, organisms to the bottom of the tank, reusing them for retreatment, and the clean water is coming off to go actually to the river. So after this process, we have one more thing to do, is chlorinate our effluent water.
Do the bugs, none of the bugs get put back into the clean water river, or do some of them?
It's a small amount. We're allowed a certain percentage, and I use it roughly, is 30 milligrams per liter a day of organisms can go to the river. We average usually single digits, 5 and below.
Every building and tank that we see here has a purpose. So we have pretty many buildings behind us, Brent. Could you tell us what they are and what they do?
We have 2 buildings and a round tank. The first small building here is our centrifuge operation, and the second building is our dryer operation. And the round building is where our sludge gets processed. As I mentioned, we digest it. So to go in sequence, the digester, we actually pump the digester sludge into the centrifuge and use centrifugal force to remove water. So we're taking water out of the sludge. Then from the sludge from there goes over to the dryer operation, and we're actually using natural gas to dry our sludge. And that basically, we're taking it almost up to 100% dried material. And at that point, we have a dry product that is being used locally by all the farmers.
And the reason for drying the product is it's lighter, so it's less expensive to distribute.
Yes, sludge is our biggest cost of this entire facility. For every pound of water removed, that means less cost for us to transport it. And between the centrifuge and the dryer, we're saving on average of $5,000 a day in disposal costs just by running the dryer.
And what type of fields is this particular sludge spread out on? It's not for grazing, correct?
It's mainly for grazing material, for grasslands. And they're also starting to use it for corn as well.
And it's deemed safe and appropriate for those uses?
Yes. There's actually, when you dry the sludge, it becomes we call it a Class A sludge product, and there is no pathogens in it.
We're at the very end of the wastewater treatment process here. Brent, can you tell us what this is?
Basically what we have, this is called a chlorine contact tank, and we're adding, the last process, we add chlorine to disinfect the wastewater. We want to basically not sterilize it, but actually take out any potential of pathogens hitting the river that's harmful to the aquatic life or people that are downstream drinking our effluent.
So again, there's a limit to the amount of chlorine that you can put into this process.
There's a limit for how much chlorine we're allowed to put in the process, and there's also a limit on how many pathogens we're allowed in the wastewater.
And this water actually, this is the water that goes back out into the river?
That's correct.
Brent, this is a very interesting looking part of the plant, and this is known as your screw pump. Can you tell us what this does?
Basically, all a screw pump does is pumps up that aeration tank mixed liquor to our clarifiers. They're pumping about 10,000 gallons per minute of mixed liquor to our clarifiers. And the whole purpose of these pumps is we have contaminated soil on the site here. So our clarifiers could not be built down in their wetlands. They had to be built at a higher area, so we're actually just pumping it to a higher elevation.
And these also run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
That is correct. They're non-stop. On average, we run two continuously, and when we get a lot of rain, we can run all 5 of them.
And if one of these goes down, you still have enough to be able to back up the system?
That is correct. We have always a spare. If the spare breaks, we'd have to put spare pumps here, but there's, at all times, we always have to have 4 available.
4 running at all times. Okay,
yes.
Thank you. So here we are in the lab with lab supervisor Chrissy Pettypacker, and this is the beginning and the end of some processes. Could you tell us what you do here?
Correct. We are an environmental lab, an environmental wastewater treatment plant lab. We are certified by the state for DEP. I have 2 lab analysts. Natalie is over there and Chelsea is over there. What we do basic like wet chemistry testing. We run the same tests every day. We do pH on our influent, on our effluents. We do fecal coliform. We do solids testing, dissolved solids, suspended solids, things like that, BOD, basic things like that.
What are we looking at here on the counter?
This is our influent and effluent samples that we pour out and we run. These are composite samples that we run these tests on every day. They're 24-hour composites, both for influent and for effluent. This is our influent. This is what's coming into the plant. So you see how dirty it is. You know, everything from your toilets, sinks, things like that, everything that goes down the drain comes to us. So this is how a typical influent sample would look like that. After the process that you've already gone through, you know, through the plant, the tour, this is our effluent leaving the plant. This is what's going to the river. So actually it's very, very clean.
That water looks cleaner than the water that's in the river.
Not drinkable, mind you, we're not a drinking water plant. However, that is how cleaned up it gets when it leaves here.
Chrissy, what are we looking at here?
So this, one of the tests I said that we run in here is our fecal coliform test. Fecal coliforms, you know, they live in the intestines of mammals, humans. And what this is, we test our effluent, which is what's going to the river, what's leaving the plant. We test that for fecal coliform. We are only allowed a 200 average per month of bacteria leaving this plant going into the river. So this little test, this is what we run. We have our effluent sample. We add a little bit of media, which is a food to it for the bugs. And it goes into this little compartment here. It gets sealed in our little sealer, a heat sealer, and it goes into a water bath, a very warm water bath, which is this is right behind me at 44.5 degrees for 24 hours. Well, I'm sorry, 18 to 22 hours. And then what happens when we pull this out in the morning, this is all the yellow squares is what we count, and that will indicate and tell us how many you know, bugs or fecal coliform, I'm sorry, are in the leaving the plant.
And then what happens if you find that there's too much fecal coliform when you run the end of the test?
If we find that there are a lot, you know, going on, we can tell the operators that they need to increase the chlorine residual for us before we take our samples.
Okay, and that's how the whole process is. Everything is indicating, you know, how much you need to add, how much you need to do to reduce odors, to reduce
Bacteria.
the bacteria.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, we are always very good contact with our operators. There's a lot of communication that goes on between us and them.
Just this April of spring of 2016, we have adopted a new ordinance dealing with fats, oils, and grease that come through the wastewater treatment plant. Can you tell us how that was adopted, studied, and what it all means?
Well, Karen started the program back before 2004. The Pottstown wastewater treatment plant does not treat fats, oils, and grease, so we try to stop it before it gets here. Our job is to go out to all the restaurants and make sure their grease traps are functioning correctly.
We go out and we inspect 105 restaurants to inspect their grease traps to ensure that the fats, oils, and grease isn't leaking into our sewer system. So what we do is we actually go out and to each restaurant and inspect the actual trap itself to make sure that those harmful fats, oils, and grease aren't coming to our plant.
And so these ladies did a wonderful job in the studies and making sure that this all happened. We're standing here with the lab employees,
Yes.
Natalie Sassman and Chelsea Payne. And Natalie and Chelsea, do you have specific titles?
We're just the lab technicians and the
fog
fog inspectors. Yeah.
Brent, give us a little bit of history about the Pottstown wastewater treatment plant, where we came from and where we're headed.
Well, to the history of the plant started in the 1920s and 1930s, where it's a very simple process. You set out some sludge and send it to the river. And now, as you give the tour that we provided, it's a complex system in regards to all the equipment. And that leads into where we're headed is we're implementing an asset management program here so that the next generation knows what we're doing with our maintenance program.
And can you tell us a little bit about what the asset management system is? Because that's very new.
It's basically, we're going to catalog all the equipment that you saw through the facility and give it a history.
And not just the equipment, but it goes all the way down to nuts and bolts. So what it takes to operate the plant, and then what an estimated time that needs to be changed or maintained or replaced.
That's correct. The system will give out work order systems, tell you what tools you need to accomplish the job.
And this keeps waiting for something to break down so that you're always on a regular maintenance system.
That's correct.
And this asset management system can be used throughout the borough for not just the nuts and bolts and operations of the treatment plant, but all the way down to roads and streets, to trees, to anything and everything that we have to be able to maintain in the borough.
That's correct. We're going to start the wastewater treatment plant first, move up to the water treatment plant, and then obviously broaden out within the borough. And again, it not only helps us from nuts and bolts, but also with budgetary and staffing issues.
And how far into the process are you with it here? How much of the equipment and nuts and bolts do you have entered?
We probably have maybe 10% of our facility done at this point. Our game plan is by January 1st of 2017 to totally implement it.
Thank you very much.